Always a pleasure to welcome back Professor David Anderson, lifelong doctor and medical academic. David, thank you so much for coming back.
A pleasure, John, and thank you for all your excellent programs, which I really enjoy. If enjoy is the right word.
Indeed.
In these troubled times.
Yeah, I don't think we aim to be enjoyable or entertaining, but there's essential things to learn. Which brings us on to today's topic, really. I mean, it sounds melodramatic, but, is it conceivable that the human race is under existential threat, a real threat to its existence, or at least a real threat to the fabric of civilization?
Well, I'm afraid I believe it is. And I wanted really to touch on my other interests, but let's start with how I became active in respect of so-called COVID-19, because we're talking now about March 2020, and I woke up to the obvious realization that this was a virus. It turns out it was quite clearly a synthetic virus, a virus bioweapon, but also acting in concert with vitamin D deficiency. And this came to me actually in my sleep, that this was obvious. And I had been working for many years off and on vitamin D and human illness.
Yeah, fortune favours the prepared mind, David, doesn't it? I mean, you've been doing medicine basically since you were 18, so it's and that's why we really appreciate you coming on. That you're giving, you see threats that other people aren't seeing, and it's
Well, I mean, I decided that I was going to do medicine and become a doctor when I had acute appendicitis operated on by my uncle surgeon, or surgeon uncle, which was an extraordinary phenomenon. But anyway, I decided at 4 that I was going to become a doctor, but to try and help people. And I was very fortunate in many respects, but I studied medicine in Scotland, in Dundee, and right early on, the people I was working with were interested in vitamin D resistant rickets. There were families, and vitamin D deficiency in the Asian population in Scotland was well documented. So it was not really a surprise to me. I realized and gradually realized later, in respect to my own illnesses and allergic problems, that I was chronically D deficient. Anyway, fast forward to COVID-19, and it was quite clear that among doctors in the UK, the mortality from the virus was about 10 times higher. It was more than that, probably. I mean, of the first 26 doctors to die from COVID, 25 were Black, Asian, or minority ethnic. And this came to David Grimes and myself independently, and we got working on it, and we got a little book out in May of 2020. And then we worked.
This was the first one here, wasn't it?
That was the first one, yes. And then I really wrote another book, and David on vitamin D3 and the Great Biology Reset, because this great reset, a psychopathic reset, if ever there was.
Whenever has a grandiose human scheme for global domination worked out in practice. It's like a James Bond plot, but this is real. It's
It is. It's also it's interesting that it imitates so closely 1984
absolutely.
and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
Brave New World. Yeah.
Well worth reading. But but what I see now is that this is humanity under threat from basically empathic humanity,
Yeah.
such as I think we belong to,
Yeah.
under threat, serious threat from psychopathic humanity.
So this is the current battle, isn't it? It's the empaths v the psychopaths.
It is, yes.
And what I find particularly distressing about this is that the psychopaths have recruited large groups of empaths who actually think they're doing the right thing.
Well, that is absolutely true, and it's one of the things, because I've been focused on vitamin D deficiency, and vitamin D deficiency not just in respect to the direct threat of COVID-19, the virus, but also in respect to the patented pseudo vaccines, which are designed to
the genetic preparations,
especially to if we're vitamin D deficient, and so in my opinion, everybody should be taking the equivalent of 4,000 units a day of vitamin D3. D3 is better than D2 because it's the one that that we make from the action of ultraviolet light on our skin from the sun. And this is has been an absolutely central feature to human evolution, because we are a very long-lived species. We're a species with unique type of brain function, which unfortunately quite often can get duped by others. So that is a major problem at the moment. And you're right, a lot of empathic people have really been what I call gullibalized by the lies.
Yeah.
And this is
what psychopaths do, David, isn't it? They manipulate.
Yes.
They lie, they cheat, they manipulate, they seek power, they seek domination for their own aggrandizement at any cost, and they don't notice if they step on people's faces, but they manipulate other people to step on people's faces as well.
Yes. I've been working with Professor Joseph Tritto, who is an excellent friend now, and we actually submitted to the International Criminal Court in The Hague in June of 2022. We submitted the case against 10 individuals we've added one since. We identified as being instrumental in creating this synthetic virus, specifically to damage other individuals, and that to my mind, a major lesson from the present pandemic or pseudo epidemic is that you should be held individually responsible for crimes against humanity. And we identified 4 people from the United States, 1 Brit, 1 Frenchman, a couple of Chinese, and an Ethiopian, who you can put, I'm sure, put names to them all, for their roles, active or passive, in creating and disseminating this virus. And the patent system or patent system in the United States means that you can actually patent the structure of a novel virus, which you've created or helped create as a bioweapon. And then you can insert the same sequence, which is what's happened with this spike protein, into.
This is terrifying, because they could create a virus. You could create a virus at any level, one that does a little bit of damage, like the COVID virus, to cause global disruption. Or you could create one that made people quite sick. Or you could make one that had a mortality rate of over 90%. You know, it's kind of a flexible production line almost that could be done. And, you know, this research really does need to be taken with the same level as threat, in my view, as nuclear war or ecological catastrophe.
Yes, and unless you place the responsibility on the individual, you're going to get nowhere, because what we've got now is a psychopathic system, global system, which is it's really been going on for the whole of my lifetime, because if we look back, and we see it originating in DARPA, which is a branch of the Pentagon, and it's appalling. But there's no point in attacking the Pentagon, but you must make sure, and this is a high responsibility of the International Criminal Court, which has got all the evidence from Trito and myself on the origins of the virus and individual roles. Yes, other people, of course, have been duped in to be part of the system, including the press and normal people who believe in conspiracy theories. Well, this is not a theory.
No. I've had the misfortune of working with psychopaths in my life. And what I've discovered is that they're actually highly pragmatic. Very often they're intelligent, and they realise, sometimes psychopaths realise, that actually becoming an obvious criminal psychopath is not very good. So they'll become a chief executive or a lawyer or a doctor, or, you know, they will channel that into pragmatic modalities. And one of the pragmatic modalities is not so much fear of punishment, but an acknowledgement that punishment will interfere their ability to be psychopathic and to manipulate in future. So the idea of personal accountability, I think, is probably absolutely crucial, because if not, they'll just carry on. But if there's a personal threat, then even though they might not care, pragmatically, they'll realise it's going to interfere with their performance, and that will moderate their behaviour.
Yeah, well, you know, there's all sorts of degrees of emotional empathy, and that it's the true psychopath or psychosociopath, because basically sociopathy in a profession, for example, such as medicine,
we've all seen it. We've all seen it.
What you see is the development of targeted aggression.
Yep.
Whereby you use your own special expertise to harm others, so anyway, I'm very interested. I've long been interested in human evolution, and came at an understanding, or at least an interest in mankind's past.
Yeah, I want to do that, David. But just before we do that, how long do you think? Now, and it's a completely unfair question, but it interests me. How long do you think people have looked like me, white?
Well, I'm sure it's maybe 13 or more than 13,000 years.
So relatively recently in human history.
Well, we don't know, because I think I understand fairly well the last time that mankind and a whole number of large mammals were under threat of extinction. I mean, and that was 12,900 years ago,
Yeah.
the onset of the so-called Younger Dryas cooling. But there were almost certainly the whole of the ice ages there were threats. So it may well be that the pale-skinned humans go back 50,000 or 60 or 100,000 years.
But the only advantage of being white really is to make the vitamin D, isn't it? I mean,
Absolutely,
that's
yes.
the principal advantage. You might make some more nitric oxide and things, but
Yes.
I mean, it's vitamin D. The main evolutionary driver of being white is vitamin D production.
Yes,
And why don't people realise that as an indicator of how important and essential vitamin D is? That it's worth changing your whole skin colour to get more.
Yeah.
And yet, because we live indoors now, the governments don't recommend giving some extra vitamin D. It just seems so obvious.
Obvious.
Well,
yes, yes. And the question, I mean, there's a major question is how much vitamin D? And it's interesting going back into the 100 years or so, when at one time, I think it was in the 1920s, Glaxo actually marketed vitamin D. And, and one of the first Nobel Prizes was given to Niels Finsen, who discovered that ultraviolet light protected you against tuberculosis of the skin. So the knowledge of vitamin D's role in the immune system goes back well over 100 years.
And now, with the advantage of hindsight, we can look at Niels Finsen's work and give a molecular explanation, a biochemical explanation for why that's working, can't we? That the ultraviolet light is going to produce the vitamin D. The vitamin D is going to be converted into the active form of vitamin D, the 25-OH vitamin D. That's going to be used by all of the white cells in the body that are required for immunity.
Yes, well, 25-hydroxy is the reservoir form.
That's right, yeah.
It's not actually biologically active as far as we know itself.
No.
It's got to be converted to 125. But
that step only takes a few hours, doesn't it?
Oh, it's very, very, very quick. The problem is that vitamin D is only used once.
Yep.
Because it codes for its own destruction.
Yep.
It codes for an enzyme 24-hydroxylase, which converts 125 to 124-25, which is, as far as we know, inactive. And this codes for well over 1,000 genes. The estimates have been up to 2,700 genes, which is clearly it's right at the center of our protection.
Why don't people get that about 10% of our genes, about 10% of human genetics doesn't work without vitamin D?
Yes. And it's very interesting that I think that in the course of our evolution, our species has been threatened mainly by meteorite impacts of varying sizes. Everyone knows about Chicxulub and the extinction of the dinosaurs some 70 million years ago. What is, I think, really interesting, bringing us up to date, is that the last big extinction of big animals was around 12,900 years ago.
And again, people don't realise the amount of megafauna that existed up until that time. It was all over Europe. There's the famous tar pits where they've picked out a lot of these skeletons in, is it Texas or California? But we used to have huge versions of everything.
Yes.
Massive things, and we simply don't have them anymore.
Well, absolutely. And I have been interested in this for a long time. As you know, my wife and I spent from 1991 for 20 years or so in Hong Kong, and I got very interested in in Chinese culture, ancient culture, and this is another example of mainstream denial. It's quite extraordinary that there was this Hongshan culture, which you could, in Hong Kong, you could just buy obviously authentic pieces of jade carving and other carvings. And I got very interested in this, and I'm still interested in it from the point of view of what actually happened 12,900 years ago. And what is absolutely central to what happened was wiping out of all of the large mammals, including most humans, in North America.
A proper human bottleneck, looking to
Well,
survive.
what the ice sheets, which were have covered North America particularly for about 3 million years, and these had formed on top of forests and tundra, etc. And so, I mean, I became very interested when I started to read Graham Hancock's work. And also there's an American-Italian, Antonio Zamora. And there are a whole lot of people who have presented evidence for a massive meteorite impact somewhere on the Earth. And Graham Hancock and Zamora believe that the primary impact was on the North American ice sheet. Now, I've got some criticism, and I don't want to go into details here, but Graham Hancock's been very kind to let me put an argument, illustrated discussion on his blog site. So if you go to grahamhancock.com/AndersonD2, the argument is there. And that is the argument linking what I believe I have direct evidence for, which is a large meteorite impact in northern China, in Inner Mongolia, which led to production of a very, very interesting meteoritic glass, which was carved. And this is just part of, it's quite clear that what is happening now, they had a very good business model, which was that you were buried with your objects. So that was self-perpetuating, that kept itself going. But now there are quite extraordinary things that have been coming out of China in vast quantities, clearly from the Hongshan culture. And what I believe that part of what we're seeing now in academia is, and it's been a tendency throughout history, I think, that people wanted to control what's happened in the past. So, David Anderson, a physician and endocrinologist, has absolutely no business being interested in ancient cultures, and just ignore him and have his papers been peer-reviewed. Well, no, peer-reviewed. I have written a book or two about them, but the peer review just reduces everything to the lowest common denominator. So my theory is that yes, there was a meteorite impact on the ice sheet, but what if it was a small impact, a deflected fragment from this primary impact in Inner Mongolia, of which I have plenty of evidence, and this a little tiddler, say like 100 meters across, traveling at 10 or 20 kilometers a second, just drills a hole in the ice sheet, which, by the way, was 2 kilometers thick, 2 to 3 kilometers thick. And we know where this must have happened. It would have happened in a place called Saginaw Bay. It's well worth looking at the Great Lakes. And off Lake Huron, there's a thumb like that called Saginaw Bay. And so my adaptation, I think Zamora is absolutely right that there was a massive explosion on or under the ice sheet, and that enormous chunks of ice were thrown up into the stratosphere and came down and produced the Carolina Bays and the Nebraska rainwater basins. If you look at the evidence, which is outlined in that article and in Zamora's books, it's very clear that this was a unique phenomenon and was then followed by massive fires. There's a black mat of fires extending right the way across the northern hemisphere from America to as far as Europe.
And this would have basically blotted out the sun.
This would have blotted out the sun, absolutely.
So they wouldn't get the photosynthesis, so the megafauna could die out, and there'd be a big pressure for humans to become lighter coloured skin to make more vitamin D.
Well, almost certainly what happened. There's another American author who unfortunately no longer is, called Paul LaViolette, and he's written an excellent book, Earth Under Fire. Now, his theory was that actually 12,000, 13,000 years ago, and intermittently, there have been massive changes in sunshine, leading to global warming on a massive scale. I mean, 6 degrees is the evidence is that at the end of the bowling Alarod interstadial.
When was that?
That was around 14,000 years ago. Continued, and the Earth was clearly warming, and the ice sheets were melting. And
that's when the North Sea formed, wasn't it? Because before that there was Doggerland.
Absolutely. Well, that's a very interesting point. You see, because what we have, which I think is highly relevant to human cultural evolution, is a 1,200 year long sudden cooling called the Younger Dryas cooling, which was from 12,900 to 11,700 years before present. And that cooling, almost certainly what happened was that there was a meteorite impact, undoubtedly, a very good evidence for impact diamonds and things, and this layer under the black mat. But so 1,200 years is a long time, and I am really of the view that mankind, having recovered from what was these massive fires and blotting out of the sun, we may have become, more of us become white at that time, but that would have led to a massive blotting out of vitamin D, which means that we become very, very susceptible to virus infections. And it's extraordinary that 8% of our genome is actually retroviral in origin. That's before the idiots controlling the world at the moment are insisting that everybody's mRNA vaccinated with poisons. But this is almost certainly a very important element of recent human evolution. All stages of human evolution, because big impacts, and the impact that I'm talking about, if I'm right about the primary impact being in China, this was a metallic meteorite measuring 600 by 250 meters. Okay, a relative tiddler compared with the one that extinguished the dinosaurs, but just as dynamic. And the idea, I won't go into details now, but obviously I have a vested interest in people studying and criticizing my theory. But what's happening now is we've got this a completely artificial system run by big business, big money, and big pharma, which is clearly, there are elements, as you've discussed, elements indicating that there are people on this planet with an enormous amount of money who are very keen to extinguish empathic humans and leave the planet for the psychopaths.
And people with power that isn't necessarily derived from money, but uses money as a manipulative tool to control.
Yes.
And then we've got these ludicrous experiments going on. We don't know, but we believe are going on in the UK now to actually bring about solar dimming. So, a smaller scale. I mean, it's obvious you're going to make less vitamin D.
Yeah.
All these blinking solar panels aren't going to work as well. But more seriously, you need sunlight to take the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, to produce sugars, and to produce the oxygen. So by solar dimming, you're actually increasing the amount of carbon dioxide and reducing the amount of oxygen. Yeah. And I suspect that you, like me, like to breathe some oxygen occasionally.
Yeah.
And we like to eat plants that have been fed on carbon dioxide and water. I mean, this is schoolgirl, basic science.
I think you should say school person.
Yeah, school person, yeah. No, I was just thinking, I've met some really bright girls lately, so I don't want to exclude them. But, I've gone to all the trouble of interviewing a professor of medicine, but I could have interviewed anyone from the fourth form, and they would have told me this.
Well, I tell you, another element of relevance, of interest, is what's happening in the United States at the moment. We've got electric vehicles being produced by Tesla, Elon Musk. I have a great deal of respect for him as a very wealthy but very intelligent and, in my opinion, quite empathic man. I mean, he's not a psychopath, but he's. It's interesting that the complex metals that are necessary to make these batteries, 95% of them are coming from China, from northern China, in the region of my twin craters, which I postulate was a metallic impact. And that I find very interesting. But also, if I'm right, and this fragment was deflected off and landed from, this is 40 degrees latitude, 40 degrees north, landed 40 degrees north on the other side of the planet on the Laurentide ice sheet, burrowed through, and what's underneath the ice sheets? Massive amounts of methane clathrate. So my little thesis is that what happened, maybe it was there was a meteorite impact. In fact, the deflected fragment set off the biggest methane explosion of all time. Which now this could be tested easily by people who actually like to test hypotheses. But the problem with Zamora's theory of a direct cometary impact hitting at Saginaw Bay is that that's suggesting all of the kinetic energy came from outer space. What I'm suggesting is that the secondary impact set off the biggest methane explosion of all time. You can argue that I've done calculations of the sums, and it also fits rather better with the Carolina Bays and Nebraska rainwater basins. You've got these bays which are elliptical in shape, and Antonio Zamora has done a tremendous amount of work. But he just argues that the energy all had to come all from space, whereas hypothesis. I have no qualifications for making such a hypothesis, except that it's a nice idea. And a subglacial explosion would do just as well, and then would be followed, having blown the lid off the ice sheet, would be followed by methane fires, these all around the world, and a massive melting. And you asked earlier about the period of melting. Well, nature often has opposing forces, and here you've got let's say Anderson is right about this subglacial methane explosion.
Could have caused a chain reaction with methane going off all around the world.
You can and then it would set off a chain reaction, which would lead to sudden. Laviolette mentions he doesn't mention an impact, but he presents very strong evidence that this warming, the Berlin-Allerod warming that occurred starting about 14 or 15,000 years ago, and that then led to massive glacier waves. So why did the large mammals, almost all of the large mammals in the northern hemisphere, why were they wiped out? Well, the ones in North America were wiped out along with the Clovis people by the shower of the biggest hailstorm of all time. You know, chunks a kilometer in size. Some of these bays. Well, that's not good for big animals underneath. You can't hide from that. Then there were the fires, which led to further melting. Then there was a blocking out of the sun. So after the fires have died down, let's say 1 or 2 or 3 years, and there's a big thick layer, black mat, illustrated in Graham Hancock's book America Before. Once that has all died down, then you've got 1,200 years back into the Ice Age, because there's stuff up in the stratosphere, there's lots of water vapor and stuff. And then, so a reforming of the ice sheets, and then 11,700 years ago, a massive sudden temperature rise, I mean, really, really precipitous, which led to further massive global melting.
Do you think global warming is the problem at the moment, or is this?
How
much of this is hype? I mean, how much is real and how much is hype?
No, I think we went through the period of global warming, 11,700 years ago, the last one. If you look at the ice core data, it's quite clear, and I couldn't resist the temptation of just including a little bit illustration of some of these figures in our book on vitamin D and the Great Biology Reset. No, I mean, the piddling amounts. It's not that we aren't. We should really be concentrating on what are we going to do the next time mankind and big animals are threatened by or assaulted by another big meteorite.
Or is there a more immediate anthropogenic problem going on?
Well, we there is, but we have,
because we need to survive till we get another meteorite, don't we? We need to survive the next 100 years, and that's what concerns me.
I know, you're absolutely right. So it brings us back to what do we good people do about it? We have to analyze what has happened.
Yeah.
Governments have obviously been gullibalized by these lies about global warming and lowering CO2 and stuff. Bill Gates, there's a book that I have read and reread by a chap called Daniel Jupp, a Brit, entitled Gates of Hell, Why Bill Gates is the Most Dangerous Man in the World.
Well, I couldn't possibly comment on that, but that is the title of the book.
Don't comment, but I can.
We can say that this book exists.
This book does exist.
The title exists.
And it's well worth reading if you believe what you're told by people who have vested interests in reducing global population.
The other thing that concerns me at the moment is the I think things like carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are being used as modalities of control.
Yeah.
And modalities of financial gain with things like carbon trading. I mean, in the UK, we've got all this net zero stuff, but the Chinese are making 900 times more greenhouse gases than we are or something. The difference will be infinitesimal, but the opportunities for controlling the British population are really quite massive. And if you reduce carbon dioxide, you're going to reduce plant growth. And yeah. I feel that there is many factors globally attacking our agricultural system.
Absolutely.
And if people can control the agricultural system, they control the food, they control everything. Because if you're hungry, you'll do whatever it takes to get food for you and your family. So to use food as a modality of control is one of my main concerns at the moment. And we could talk about many things about this.
Yeah.
We've got the inheritance tax on farmland in the UK. We've got the global attack on the dairy industry. We've got individuals owning huge swathes of land around the world. We've got governments holding huge swathes of land around the world. We've got complete failure to look after the ecology of most of the globe's soil. And to me, this is just a recipe for disaster. I mean, I fear that massive global famine on a scale that we've never seen in recorded human history before is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And of course, psychopaths don't care about that.
No, they'll be taking, well, I mean, we know Fauci, for example, admitted to taking 6,000 units of vitamin D a day. And I'm sure he's told his friends. The whole thing has to be brought back to individual responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that, unfortunately, we don't know how far it's gone. Has it gone beyond the point of no return?
Well, global systems are being manipulated. There's no question about that. And the degree to which global systems are being controlled is still up for debate. But the more you learn about these things, the more you have cause for anxiety. And
yes.
Maybe you and me won't see this, David, but
well,
the next generation will.
For my money, I've certainly had a very good, a very rewarding life, and I've earned more than enough money to I've got a thing called a pension. Several things. I don't know if you remember those back the days of the pension, but basically it means that if you survive, you you're paid on the back of all your friends who've died long ago.
It's true. True.
And no, we have a real responsibility to, in my opinion, and it'll sound like I'm plugging my book, which is only partly true, on vitamin D, but it really is important for people to realize that the lies that have been told about vitamin D. It's an extraordinarily safe natural substance. If you are overweight or have a problem with your bowels or liver, take calcifediol, which is the 25-hydroxylated form.
Which you can't buy over the counter in the United Kingdom, but you can in Italy and Spain.
Can in Italy, yeah. I mean, but you can buy the book and you can download the book for nothing anyway.
Yeah, we'll put the links to that. That's very generous. I mean, the reason we're doing this is not for ourselves. As I say, we'll probably, but by the time these catastrophes occur, we may not be here. But we are doing this for the next generation. It's and I feel that. I mean, I'm not putting myself in your professor of medicine category, but having studied things all our lives like this, I think we have a moral obligation to talk about the risks and the dangers that we see coming.
Absolutely, and the responsibility has to be the only way we can get out of this is by activating the International Criminal Court, which has a responsibility for identifying individuals. You cannot hide behind orders.
Correct.
I was told
Nuremberg made that clear.
Absolutely.
You cannot say I was just obeying orders.
No.
That does not take away individual accountability. Now, you gave this into the European Court of Human Rights in June 2022. What have you heard since then?
Well, we eventually, actually, Joseph Trito, our lawyer, Barbara Bonazzi and I, we actually physically on October the 10th of 2022, exasperated by a lack of response from the International Criminal Court, we went to The Hague in person. It's a very dangerous place, by the way, for old people to go, because there are cycle lanes and you can easily get killed, as I nearly was, by passing cyclists.
Yeah, anyway, you've got to get used to that.
You have. Yeah. Anyway, we actually eventually got acknowledgement, and we have an office of the public prosecutor number, and we've sent a further bit of evidence. So we have an OTP number, which is published actually in my book, I think, to give them that. This court has to start working properly. And but
it hasn't done anything.
It hasn't done anything.
So it's not.
It's got all the evidence.
It basically hasn't taken your evidence, as far as you know. It hasn't taken cognizance of your evidence.
Well, I understand that the public prosecutor is under accusation of something nasty, but it's up to individuals and institutions to insist that the case is examined properly, and to accept that biowarfare has to stop.
But in the last 3 years, it hasn't.
No. In fact, what I think we're seeing is the creation of this virus, and this is argued in our submission. The creation of the virus was done in order to make sure that there was enough panic around to force the vast majority of people to be vaccinated or pseudo-vaccinated with these RNA and DNA products, which, by the way, are bound to increase your vitamin D deficiency. And almost certainly, if you were taking vitamin D, that will have protected you against the more harmful effects of these pseudo-vaccines.
Yeah, but, because I mean, anytime you generate an immune response, whether it's a natural physiological one or an artificially induced one, that's going to use up vitamin D. It's going to deplete your vitamin
D. Because it codes for its own destruction.
And why on earth aren't doctors testing people's vitamin D levels and titrating it up into the optimum range? It's just not being done.
I'm afraid that we've seen basically the abolition of proper medicine. And, you know, individuals, I've seen this several times in the course of my career, that if you threaten somebody wants to tell the truth about something, and if you make it clear that if they do, they lose their income, you know, that is a very powerful force, and that has happened very, very widely. Those of us like David Grimes and myself who are extraordinarily old and have pensions dating back, I believe we have a particular responsibility. Because, yeah, mankind is not going to last forever. We are a transient species, but this is the first time when it looks like we're being threatened by our own kind.
And on a potentially global scale, we now have the technology to make this ubiquitous.
On a global scale, and instead of actually, obviously, this is why the title of my book was Vitamin D and the Great Biology Reset. These idiots, these criminals running the world at different levels, and unfortunately, it's USA and China are mainly responsible. I think to me, it's an interesting example of coincidences which probably aren't coincidences.
Well, the UK and Europe aren't exactly where I'd like them to be at the moment either. To put
it not.
Mildly.
No, not. So we have to work, and we've got a meeting at the end of this month. Joseph Trito, who's president of a World Academy of Biotechnology, which is part of UNESCO and the UN. He argues very strongly that we have to return. We've got to take these organizations out from the hands of wealthy psychopaths and their systems.
But any psychopaths, whether they're wealthy or not.
But the particularly dangerous ones are the wealthy ones.
Well, the ones that have power.
The ones that have power.
Money is one modality of exercising power.
Yeah, and it's and that particular individual is now being added to the list for Nuremberg to examine.
I mean, another. We've talked about a literal dark age due to things being thrown up into the atmosphere. I also fear another what you call a metaphorical dark age. It's quite possible that George Orwell saw the future of humanity as a boot on a human face.
Yes,
and we're already seeing it in parts of the world, and.
Well,
we have the global technology now to do this. This is the point. The technology now exists to control populations. The technology exists to control world finances. The technology exists to control where people live or don't live.
and your health is under threat. I argue very strongly that big pharma should just be abolished. Sorry, big pharma has no place. With small pharma, which is making small amounts of vitamin D, Lasix, all the other drugs, we don't need any more drugs. What we do need is better natural immunity, so we need to boost our natural immunity, so we don't need to vaccinate our children and give them autism. We don't need to vaccinate our old people and give them Alzheimer's disease. We should let humanity last as long as individuals live into old age, on modest amounts of return money to what it evolved as, which was a form of barter, and let the population look after itself, by the way, because once you look after people, instead of, forcing them to be vaccinated against polio or whatever, polio vaccination, by the way, in India, Bill Gates was kicked out of India for a year or two until Modi came along because of use of live vaccines between, I think it was 2004 and 2016, live polio vaccines that are illegal in the United States, cause vaccine paralysis, identical with poliomyelitis, in at least 500,000 children in India. Think about that. It's appalling that an individual who knows nothing about medicine, cares less, is obsessed, as indeed his family were for many years, and the Rockefeller family too, with the problems of overpopulation. It's appalling that this has been allowed to go this far, and I include myself as having some responsibility for this, because you retire, you have interests like Hongshan jade and stuff like that, and things that and meanwhile people with psychopathic tendencies controlling the world, destroying our children. I mean, the outrage of what has been happening in California and elsewhere, to child trafficking, child paedophilia, etc.
And that's without even thinking about children before they're born.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But we now at the point where medicine and understanding of science, contraception does exist. People do choose, as we chose to have, a family of 3 sons. It's
well, you didn't choose the sons bit, but you chose the you chose the children bit.
Yeah, we chose the children.
You get what you're given.
Yeah, and I think that pretty much, depopulation agenda, big pharma, Bill Gates, big money, it's all, and I think finally, there's a bit of an irony that the last time mankind was threatened with extinction and was extincted happened in the United States of America, what is now the United States, where there was this massive subglacial or glacial methane explosion, or explosion anyway, that wiped out they wiped out vast tracts of humanity. And if you look at La Violette's book, Earth Under Fire, he gives, there's something like 500 myths, in ancient cultures, describing fires, melting, floods, etc. And it's such a shame. It's a great shame that there's a tremendous amount of censorship of academia, of all kinds. We're no longer in the short-lived age of enlightenment.
Yeah, it was good while it lasted, wasn't it?
It was, but
from Isaac Newton up till about the year 1995.
Yes, it may have been earlier than that because of, the world wars. I mean, we haven't touched on this, on the abuse of warfare, but yeah, well, it was a privilege to be alive at that time, but it's also a responsibility, and people need to wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. Professor, as always, plenty to think about there. I'm not sure I dare publish all of that, but we'll certainly go through it. And yeah.
Well, you can blame me.
Serious threats that need, well, first of all, serious numbers of people recognising the threats that we're under, and then people cleverer than me working out what the heck we're going to do about it, because I'm a bit stuck.
Well, I think that the legal profession needs to get its act together, and there are people that I know involved in the International Criminal Court,
yeah,
and these people need to wake up,
yeah,
and pin individual responsibility. But it's the individuals that go back to this contrived sequence that we've seen over the past 5 years, with or more, creation of a novel virus bioweapon in order to create a pseudo vaccine that actually isn't a vaccine at all. It makes you more D deficient in order to reduce global population. I'm sorry, people have to be held to account.
Yep. Okay, great, David. Great to talk as always.
Thanks
talk
very
again,
much.
and
Thanks,
there'll be lots
John.
of comments. I'm sure. Do feel free to go through and answer them. And
And I do actually. We've got a few hundred hard copies in English
oh yeah.
and Italian.
We'll put the links to get the book.
And they can pay for it. It'll be goes for €25.
Yeah. So you've got English copies of this, have you?
We've got English and Italian.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But
Okay.
you've kindly made it available for free download, which is very generous.
Yes. Okay.
We'll put the
Thanks.
links. Great to talk, David. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.